Welcome to Galactic Mercy, a science fiction storytelling channel set in a vast universe where alien civilizations, war fleets, and the fate of humanity collide in fateful moments.
The morning sun rose over New Cascadia like it did every day. Golden light touched the tall buildings of Haven City, the capital of humanity's most successful colony world. Children walked to school with their parents. Workers headed to offices and factories. Farmers in the countryside checked their crops. It was a normal day, a peaceful day, on a world that had known nothing but peace for 60 years. 18 million people lived on New Cascadia. They had built something beautiful here. The planet had green forests, blue oceans, and mountains that touched the clouds. Humans had come here 2 generations ago, and they had made it their home. They were proud of what they had created. They felt safe. They should not have felt safe. High above the planet, hidden behind the largest moon, a fleet waited. 200 ships sat in the darkness of space. They belonged to the Vthkai Dominion, a species that had traveled between stars for 10,000 years. The Vthkai were hunters. They were slavers. They looked at other species and saw only 2 things: threats to be destroyed or resources to be harvested. They had been watching humanity for 50 years. They had studied human colonies, counted human ships, and measured human strength. Their conclusion was simple. Humans were weak. They were young. They had only been traveling through space for 200 years. They had no powerful allies, no ancient weapons, no great fleets. They were perfect targets. Commander Vthkai stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. His eyes were completely black, like pools of oil. He looked at the blue and green planet on his viewing screen and felt nothing but hunger. "Begin the attack," he said. The Vthkai fleet moved like a wave of death. They came around the moon and descended on New Cascadia before anyone knew what was happening. The colony's defense stations fired their weapons, but there were only 12 stations against 200 ships. They were destroyed in minutes. The first bombs fell on Haven City at 9:47 inches the morning, local time. Maria Santos was walking her daughter to school when the sky turned orange. She looked up and saw fire falling from the clouds. She grabbed her daughter and ran, but there was nowhere to run. The streets filled with screaming people. Buildings collapsed. The air became hot and thick with smoke. Maria found shelter in a basement with 30 other people. They held each other and listened to the world ending above them. Her daughter, Sophia, was only 7 years old. She kept asking why this was happening. Maria had no answer. The bombing lasted for 6 hours. When it stopped, the Vthkai landing ships came down. Thousands of soldiers poured into the ruined cities. They were not there to conquer. They were there to harvest. The Vthkai separated the survivors into groups. The old and the sick were killed immediately. They had no value. The young and healthy were put in chains and loaded onto transport ships. They would be taken back to Vthkai space, where they would work in mines and factories until they died. Maria and Sophia were separated. Maria screamed and fought, but a Vthkai soldier hit her with the back of his weapon and she fell unconscious. When she woke up, she was in a dark metal room with hundreds of other humans. Her daughter was gone. She would never see Sophia again. The attack on New Cascadia lasted 3 days. When the Vthkai finally left, they took 4 million humans with them as slaves. They left behind 14 million dead. Haven City was nothing but ash and rubble. The forests were burned. The rivers were poisoned. A world that had been beautiful was now a graveyard. The first rescue ships from Earth arrived 2 weeks later. They found survivors hiding in caves and underground shelters. They found mass graves that stretched for kilometers. They found recording devices that had captured everything: the screams, the fire, the separation of families, the cruelty of the Vthkai soldiers. Captain James Chen was one of the first responders. He walked through the ruins of Haven City with tears running down his face. He had family here. His brother, his sister-in-law, and their 3 children had lived in this city. He searched for days, but he found only their names on a list of the dead. He stood in the ashes of their home and made a promise. He did not speak the promise out loud. He did not need to. It was written in his heart with fire and pain. Someone would pay for this. Someone would answer for the 18 million. The news of New Cascadia spread across human space like a shockwave. On Earth, people gathered in the streets and wept. On the colony worlds, Families searched desperately for news of loved ones. The entire human species had been wounded. They had never experienced anything like this. They had known war on their own world, but this was different. This was something from outside, something alien and cruel, something that saw them as nothing more than animals to be slaughtered or sold. The government of the United Earth Federation sent an emergency message to the Galactic Concord. This was the Great Council of the Galaxy, where the 12 elder races made decisions that affected all of known space. The Concord was supposed to keep peace. The Concord was supposed to protect the weak from the strong. Surely, the Concord would help. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was chosen to speak for humanity. She was 52 years old, a diplomat who had spent her life building bridges between species. She believed in peace. She believed in cooperation. She believed that the galaxy, despite its many problems, was a place where justice could be found. She traveled to the Concord's Great Station, a massive structure that floated in neutral space. The station was older than human civilization. It had been built by species that were ancient when humans still lived in caves. Here, the 12 elder races gathered to decide the fate of worlds. Elena entered the presidium chamber with her head held high. The room was vast, with seats rising in circles around a central platform. Representatives of 12 species looked down at her. Some had scales, some had fur, some were made of crystal or metal or things she could not identify. All of them were old, all of them were powerful, and all of them looked at her like she was a small child who had wandered into a room where she did not belong. "The representative of humanity may speak," announced the Concord's chairman, an ancient being called the Primarch. He was made of living stone, and he had ruled the Concord for 3,000 years. Elena stepped onto the central platform. Her voice was steady, but inside she was shaking with grief and anger. 18 million of my people are dead," she began. 4 million more have been taken as slaves. The colony of New Cascadia has been destroyed. This attack was unprovoked. We had no conflict with the Vthkai Dominion. We had no quarrel with them. They came to our world and murdered our children because they could, because they wanted slaves, because they knew no one would stop them. She paused and looked around the chamber. The representatives watched her with expressions she could not read. "We come to this Concord seeking justice," she continued. "We ask for the return of our people who were taken. We ask for punishment of those who planned and executed this attack. We ask for guarantees that this will never happen again. We ask for what any species would ask for when their innocent children have been burned and enslaved." When she finished speaking, there was silence. Then the Vthkai representative rose to respond. His name was Kethvor, and he was the cousin of the commander who had led the attack. He looked at Elena with his black eyes and spoke in a voice that dripped with contempt. "The human representative speaks of murder and slavery as if these are unusual things," he said. "They are not. The galaxy is not a gentle place. The strong take from the weak. This has always been true. This will always be true. Humanity is a young species. They have not yet learned their place in the natural order. Perhaps this lesson, though painful, will teach them." Elena felt her hands clench into fists. She forced herself to remain calm. "You call the murder of children a lesson?" she asked. "I call it reality," Kethvor replied. "The Vthkai Dominion needed workers. Your colony had workers. We took them. This is how the galaxy operates. If humanity does not like it, perhaps humanity should become stronger." The chamber erupted in discussion. Elena watched as the elder races debated among themselves. She heard words like unfortunate and regrettable and complicated. She heard discussions about trade agreements with the Vthkai, about economic relationships, about political alliances. She heard everything except the word justice. After 3 hours of debate, the Primarch raised his stone hand for silence. "The Concord has reached a decision," he announced. "We recognize that the actions of the Vthkai Dominion have caused harm to humanity. Therefore, the Vthkai will pay a financial settlement to the United Earth Federation. The amount will be determined by a committee. Additionally, the Vthkai representative will issue a formal apology to humanity. The matter is considered closed." Elena stared at the Primarch in disbelief. "Financial settlement?" she repeated. 18 million dead, and you offer us money?" "The Concord has spoken," the Primarch replied. "This is our decision." "What about the slaves?" Elena demanded. What about the 4 million humans who are being worked to death in Vthkai mines right now? At this very moment. The Primarch was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the internal practices of Concord members are not subject to Concord regulation. The Vthkai are free to manage their workforce as they see fit. Workforce, Elena repeated. You call slaves a workforce. The terminology is not the Concord's concern. Elena looked around the chamber. She looked at the crystal beings and the stone beings and the scaled beings and all the other ancient species who had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be young and weak and hurt. So this is your justice, she said. Money and empty words. Our children are dead, and you offer us money. Our families are in chains, and you tell us it is not your concern. This is the protection the Concord offers to its members. The Primarch's stone face showed no emotion. Humanity is not a member of the Concord, he said. You are an observer species. You have no rights here except those we choose to grant you. Then what must we do to become members? Elena asked. Membership requires a unanimous vote of all 12 elder races. The Primarch replied. It also requires a minimum of 10,000 years of interstellar civilization. Humanity has existed as a spacefaring species for 2 centuries. You will be eligible for membership consideration in approximately 9,800 years. Elena felt something break inside her. It was not her heart. Her heart had broken when she saw the recordings from New Cascadia. What broke now was her faith. Her faith in the galaxy. Her faith in cooperation. Her faith in the idea that if you spoke reasonably and asked for help, help would come. She understood now that she was alone. Humanity was alone. The great powers of the galaxy did not care about human children burning. They did not care about human families torn apart. They cared about trade and power and keeping things the way they had always been. She was about to leave the platform when Kethvor spoke again. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, you should accept the settlement. Be grateful for what you receive. Humanity is a small species in a large galaxy. You cannot fight the Vthkai. You cannot oppose the Concord. You have no power here. Take the money, mourn your dead, and move on. This is my advice to you. Elena turned to face him. She looked into his black eyes, and she saw nothing there but arrogance. He truly believed what he was saying. He truly thought humanity would bow their heads and accept this insult. He had no idea what he had awakened. You say we have no power, Elena said. You may be right. Today, we are weak. Today, we are young. Today, we stand alone against a galaxy that does not care if we live or die. But I want you to remember something. All of you. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. We are human, she said. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We are the species that crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. We are the species that never, ever, ever gives up. You think we will forget New Cascadia? We will not. You think we will forgive? We will not. You think time will heal this wound? It will not. She walked toward the exit, then stopped and turned back one final time. You will remember this day, she said. You will remember that you had a choice. You could have stood with us. You could have helped us. You could have shown us that the galaxy has room for justice. Instead, you chose to stand aside. You chose money over blood. You chose convenience over honor. That was your choice. Now you will live with it. She walked out of the chamber. Behind her, she heard laughter. Some of the representatives found her words amusing. A young species making threats. How ridiculous, how entertaining. But not everyone was laughing. A few of the elder races watched her leave with thoughtful expressions. They had lived a long time. They had seen many things. And some of them, though they would not admit it, felt a small chill run through them. There was something in that woman's eyes. Something in her voice, something that reminded them of ancient stories about young species that were pushed too far, species that burned with grief and rage until the burning became something else entirely. But surely not. Surely humans were too weak, too young, too insignificant to be a threat. Surely, Elena returned to Earth and gave her report to the Federation Council. She told them everything. The dismissal, the contempt, the offer of money in exchange for blood. When she finished, the council chamber was silent. What do you recommend? Asked President Martinez. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was hard and cold. I recommend that we accept nothing, she said. I recommend that we remember everything. And I recommend that we begin preparing for the day when we can speak to the galaxy in the only language it understands. And what language is that? The president asked. Elena looked at him with eyes that had seen too much and understood too much. Power, she said. We will speak to them in power, and they will listen. The council voted that night. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not accept the Concord settlement. Humanity would not forgive the Vthkai. Humanity would not forget. The silent years had begun. The galaxy forgot about humanity. It was easy to forget. Humans were such a small part of the great tapestry of interstellar civilization. They had 17 colony worlds and a few hundred ships. The Vthkai alone had 3,000 worlds and 50,000 ships. The elder races of the Concord controlled millions of systems. In the vast ocean of the galaxy, humanity was a single drop of water. After Ambassador Vasquez's dramatic exit from the Concord, there was some brief interest in what humans would do next. Some species expected a foolish attack. Others predicted internal collapse and civil war. A few thought humanity might simply die out, unable to cope with the trauma of New Cascadia. None of that happened. Instead, humanity did something unexpected. They went quiet. Human ambassadors still attended Concord meetings, but they rarely spoke. Human merchant ships still traveled between stations, but their crews kept to themselves. Human colonies still functioned, but they stopped accepting visitors from other species. It was as if humanity had pulled a curtain around itself and retreated into shadow. At first, the elder races were amused. They are sulking, said the Vthkai representative. Like children who did not get what they wanted. They will come back eventually, begging for scraps. But years passed, and humanity did not come back. They did not beg. They did not even complain. They simply existed, quiet and unremarkable, doing nothing that seemed important or threatening. The galaxy turned its attention to other matters. There were trade disputes to settle, territories to divide, ancient rivalries to maintain. Humanity faded from the minds of the powerful. They became a footnote, barely worth mentioning. This was exactly what humanity wanted. Behind the curtain of silence, something incredible was happening. The entire human species was transforming itself, and they were doing it in secret. It began with President Martinez's speech 3 months after the Concord's decision. He spoke to every human world at the same time, his words broadcast across all 17 colonies. We have been shown our place in the galaxy, he said. We have been told we are weak, young, and worthless. We have been told to accept the murder of our children and move on. We have been told there is nothing we can do. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was steel. They are wrong. He announced the creation of Project Phoenix. It was the largest undertaking in human history. Every human world would contribute. Every human being would play a part. The goal was simple to state but almost impossible to achieve. In 30 years, humanity would become a power that the galaxy could not ignore. We will not forget our dead, Martinez said. We will carry them with us. Their memory will fuel us. Their sacrifice will inspire us. And one day, when we are ready, we will demand the justice we were denied. Not as beggars, as equals. The response was overwhelming. On every human world, people volunteered for whatever was needed. Scientists worked double shifts. Workers rebuilt factories. Teachers rewrote education programs. Parents told their children stories about New Cascadia, making sure the memory would never fade. The transformation touched every part of human society. The economy was restructured for war production. Luxury goods became rare, as resources were redirected to weapons research and ship construction. People accepted rationing, without complaint. When someone was asked why they were willing to give up so much, the answer was always the same. For New Cascadia, for the 18 million. The education system was revolutionized. Every school taught the history of what had happened. Every child learned the names of the dead. Not all 18 million, of course, but enough to make the loss real. Sofia Santos, age 7. Michael Chen, age 12. Emma Okafor, age 5. The names were recited like a sacred text, a prayer of remembrance that bound generations together. Military academies expanded to 10 times their previous size. Young people who had grown up hearing stories of New Cascadia signed up in massive numbers. They did not want revenge for themselves. They wanted justice for their parents and grandparents, for the empty chairs at family tables, for the photographs of relatives they would never meet. Captain James Chen, who had walked through the ashes of Haven City and lost his brother's family, rose through the ranks. He was not promoted because of his grief. He was promoted because he was brilliant. He understood space combat in ways that the elder races did not. He thought differently, planned differently, fought differently. The Vthkai expect us to fight like them, he told his students at the academy. They expect formation battles, honor duels, predictable tactics. We will not give them what they expect. We will give them nightmares. He developed new doctrines of warfare: speed over strength, coordination over individual glory, adaptation over tradition. Every ship would think for itself, while moving as part of a greater whole. The enemy would face not a fleet but a swarm, intelligent and relentless. The scientists worked even harder than the soldiers. Human technology had been decades behind the elder races. That gap had to be closed and then surpassed. Dr. Sarah Kim led the weapons research division. She was a physicist who had lost her daughter in the attack. Every morning, she looked at a photograph of a smiling girl with bright eyes, and then she went to work designing weapons that could crack planets. We will not start fights, she told her team. But when fights come to us, we will end them so completely that no one will ever attack us again. Her team made breakthrough after breakthrough. Better engines, stronger shields, weapons that could punch through defenses the elder races considered unbreakable. Each achievement was hidden, kept secret from the galaxy. Human merchant ships still used old, slow technology. Human colony defenses remained modest. Everything new was kept behind the curtain. The shipyards were the heart of the transformation. Hidden in asteroid belts and gas giant moons, massive construction facilities were built in complete secrecy. The elder races had spy satellites and intelligence networks, but humanity learned to hide. Ships were constructed underground, in hollowed-out asteroids, in places that looked like nothing on any scan. Admiral Chen Wei, as James Chen was now known, watched the first new warship slide out of its hidden dock. It was beautiful and terrifying. Sleek black hull, bristling with weapons, carrying engines that could outrun anything the Vthkai had. He had named the class Vengeance. "How many can we build?" he asked. "As many as we need," the shipyard commander replied. "The entire human species is working on this. We can build as many as we need." By the 10th year, humanity had 1,000 new warships hidden in secret locations. By the 20th year, they had 5,000. The goal was 10,000, but production was accelerating. It would be reached ahead of schedule. The Concord's intelligence services occasionally reported unusual activity in human space. Increased industrial output, unusual energy signatures, strange movements of cargo ships, but their analysis always came to the same conclusion. Humanity was probably building up their economy to cope with the psychological trauma of New Cascadia. They posed no threat. They were still weak and young and insignificant. This analysis was not stupid. It was simply incomplete. The analysts looked at human activity and measured it against what they knew about human capabilities. They did not realize that human capabilities had changed. They saw shadows and dismissed them as nothing important. The Vthkai grew bolder during the silent years. 10 years after New Cascadia, they raided another human colony called Farhaven. The attack was smaller than the first one, only 200,000 taken as slaves, but it was just as brutal. Humanity did not respond. The Concord representative from Earth expressed deep concern and strong disappointment. Human merchant ships continued to trade peacefully. Human colonies remained quiet. It was as if the attack had never happened. The Vthkai laughed. They had been slightly worried after New Cascadia, wondering if humanity might do something stupid. But clearly, humans were too broken to fight back. They were perfect prey, smart enough to work but not strong enough to resist. 20 years after New Cascadia, the Vthkai attacked again. This time they hit a colony called Prosperity, taking 500,000 humans. Again, there was no military response. Again, humanity seemed to simply accept its losses. "They are completely domesticated," Kethvor told the Concord Presidium. "We have shown them who is dominant. They will never challenge us. They know their place." If Keth Vor had been able to look behind the curtain, he would have seen something very different. After each attack, the rescued recordings were shown to every human being old enough to understand. The screams, the fire, the families torn apart. Each new atrocity added fuel to the fire that burned in human hearts. Admiral Chen Wei gathered his officers after the Prosperity raid. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "How much longer?" he asked. 10 more years to reach optimal readiness," his chief of staff replied. "But we could strike now if needed. We have 7,000 ships. We have trained crews. We have—" "No," Chen Wei said. "We wait. We prepare. We make ourselves so strong that when we finally move, there will be no doubt about the outcome. Our children have waited 20 years for justice. They can wait 10 more. When we strike once. We strike completely. And we never have to strike again." He walked to a window that looked out into space. Somewhere out there, millions of humans were being worked to death in Vthkai mines. Somewhere out there, the elder races were laughing at humanity's weakness. Somewhere out there, the galaxy thought it had seen everything humanity had to offer. They were wrong. The 30th anniversary of New Cascadia approached. Humanity had changed beyond recognition. The quiet, peaceful species that had been attacked was gone. In its place was something new, something patient, something dangerous. Every human child knew the names of the dead. Every human soldier had trained for a war that was coming. Every human scientist had built weapons that would reshape the galaxy. And every human being, from the oldest grandmother to the youngest child, carried the same fire in their heart. They called it the remembrance. It was more than memory. It was identity. It was purpose. It was the thing that bound 20 billion humans together across 17 worlds. They were no longer just a species. They were a cause. Maria Santos was still alive. She was 82 years old now, living in a small apartment on Earth. She had never stopped searching for her daughter, Sophia. She had never found her, but she had not given up hope. Every year on the anniversary, she lit a candle and spoke her daughter's name. "Sophia Santos," she would say. "Age 7. Taken from New Cascadia. Never forgotten." Millions of humans did the same thing. 18 million candles lit across 17 worlds. 18 million names spoken into the darkness. It was the most beautiful and the most terrible ritual in human history. Admiral Chen Wei gave a speech on the 29th anniversary. He was old now, his hair gray and his face lined with years of work and waiting. But his voice was strong. "Tomorrow we light the candles again," he said. "Tomorrow we speak the names again. And tomorrow we continue to prepare. But I want you to know something. The waiting is almost over. The day is coming. The day when we stop mourning and start acting. The day when the galaxy learns what it means to hurt humanity." He paused and looked into the camera. His eyes were hard as steel. "To the Vthkai who are watching, and I know some of you are watching, I have a message. Enjoy your slaves while you can. Enjoy your power while you can. Because your time is ending. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength. We have been good students. Soon, you will see how much we have learned." The speech was broadcast across human space. It was also intercepted by Vthkai intelligence, who passed it to their government. Commander Vthrak, now an old warrior who had commanded the New Cascadia attack, read the transcript and laughed. "They have been making these threats for 30 years, he said. "Empty words from a beaten species. If they had the power to hurt us, they would have used it already. They are bluffing." He would remember those words a year later. When the sky above his home world filled with human ships, he would remember them as everything he had ever known burned around him. But that was still to come. For now, the galaxy remained calm. The elder races continued their ancient games of power. The Vthkai continued to prey on the weak, and humanity continued to wait. Silent and patient, counting down the days until the remembrance became the reckoning. In the hidden shipyards, the last of the Vengeance-class warships was being completed. It was the 9,000th ship, and it would be Admiral Chen Wei's flagship. He visited it during construction, walking through its empty corridors, imagining the crew that would soon fill them. On the bridge, he found a plaque that the workers had installed. It listed the names of all the Chen family members who had died on New Cascadia: his brother, his sister-in-law, his 3 nieces and nephews. Below the names was a simple message: We remember. Admiral Chen Wei touched the plaque gently. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. Soon, he whispered. Very soon. And in the darkness of space, 9,000 warships waited for his command. The 31st anniversary of the New Cascadia massacre began like every anniversary before it. Humans across 17 worlds woke before dawn. They dressed in simple clothes. They gathered with family and friends, and at exactly 9:47 inches the morning, the moment the first bombs had fallen, they lit their candles and spoke the names of the dead. But this year was different. This year, as the candles flickered in the darkness, Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of his flagship, the HSS Remembrance. Around him, 9,000 warships hung in space, hidden in the shadow of a dead star. Every ship was fully crewed. Every weapon was loaded. Every engine was ready. The Admiral looked at the candle burning on his command console. He had lit it himself, speaking the names of his brother's family. For 30 years, he had carried their memory. For 30 years, he had prepared for this moment. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, all ships report ready. Awaiting your order. Chen Wei nodded slowly. He looked at the candle flame one more time. Then he reached out and gently extinguished it. The time for mourning is over, he said. Now begins the time for justice. He turned to face his crew. They were young, most of them, born after New Cascadia. But they had grown up with the stories. They had recited the names. They carried the fire in their hearts just as strongly as those who had lived through the horror. Open a channel to all ships, the Admiral commanded. Channel open, sir. Chen Wei took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice carried across 9,000 bridges, reaching hundreds of thousands of ears. This is Admiral Chen Wei. 31 years ago, our children burned. Our families were taken in chains. Our cries for justice were answered with laughter. Today, we give our answer. He paused, letting the words sink in. We do not fight for conquest. We do not fight for glory. We fight for the 18 million. We fight for the names we have spoken every year, year after year, generation after generation. We fight so that no human child will ever be taken in chains again. His voice hardened. The galaxy told us we were weak. We have become strong. The galaxy told us we were young. We have become patient. The galaxy told us to accept our place at the bottom. Today, we show them where our place truly is. He raised his hand. All ships, engage engines. Jump to Vthkai space. The reckoning begins. 9,000 ships vanished in flashes of light, jumping through compressed space toward their targets. It was the largest coordinated military action in human history, and it happened in perfect silence. No announcements, no warnings, no demands. Just the cold, patient vengeance of a species that had waited 30 years for this moment. The Vthkai Dominion had no idea what was coming. Their home system was called Veth Prime. It contained their oldest world, their largest cities, their most sacred monuments. 300 warships defended it, along with dozens of space stations and orbital platforms. It was the heart of Vthkai civilization. Commander Vthrak, the architect of New Cascadia, lived on the homeworld. He was old now, retired from military service, celebrated as a hero. He spent his days in a beautiful mansion, surrounded by human slaves who served his every need. He never thought about the lives he had destroyed. To him, humans were not people. They were property. He was eating breakfast when the first reports came in. Commander, one of his servants said, interrupting his meal, there are ships appearing in orbit. Many ships. Vthrak looked annoyed. What ships? Whose ships? They do not match any known signatures. They are human, Commander. Vthrak laughed. Human ships? How many? A dozen? 2 dozen? Have the defense fleet destroy them. Do not bother me with such trivial matters. The servant's face was pale. Commander, there are thousands of them. For the first time in 30 years, Vthrak felt fear. He rushed to his communication center and pulled up the orbital display. His black eyes went wide. The space around Veth Prime was filling with ships. They appeared in waves, hundreds at a time, their black hulls gleaming with weapons that looked nothing like human technology. They moved in perfect formation, spreading out to surround the planet like a closing fist. Impossible, Vthrak whispered. This is impossible. The Vthkai defense fleet scrambled to respond. 300 ships moved to intercept the invaders, confident in their superior technology and experience. Vthkai had been fighting wars for 10,000 years. Humans had been fighting for 2 centuries. This should have been easy. The battle lasted 4 hours. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Human ships moved faster than anything the Vthkai had ever seen. Their weapons punched through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Their tactics shifted constantly, adapting to every Vthkai response before it could be completed. It was like fighting ghosts with unlimited firepower and perfect coordination. Admiral Chen Wei commanded from the Remembrance, watching the battle unfold on his tactical display. He felt no joy. He felt no triumph. He felt only grim satisfaction that the technology and training had worked exactly as designed. Enemy flagship destroyed, his tactical officer reported. Enemy fleet down to 47 active vessels. The remaining ships are attempting to retreat. Do not let them escape, Chen Wei ordered. We need prisoners for interrogation. Specifically, we need the locations of the slave camps. The human fleet closed around the surviving Vthkai ships. Most chose to fight to the death, rather than surrender. They had never surrendered in 10,000 years of war. They would not start now. But some ships, crewed by younger Vthkai who had never faced a real enemy, chose survival over pride. They powered down their weapons and broadcast surrender signals. Human boarding parties moved in. They were efficient and professional. They secured prisoners, collected data, and treated wounded enemies with basic medical care. This surprised the Vthkai captives. They had expected torture and execution. Humans were prey animals, after all. Prey animals did not show mercy. Why do you not kill us? One captain asked his human guard. The guard, a young woman named Lieutenant Park, looked at him with cold eyes. Because we are not like you, she said. We want justice, not cruelty. The ones responsible for the attacks will answer for their crimes. The ones who followed orders will be judged fairly. We are not monsters. She paused. But do not mistake our mercy for weakness. Your species killed 18 million of our people. 4 million more died in your mines. We have a list of every commander, every official, every person who planned or profited from the attacks. They will face justice. All of them. The Vthkai captain looked into her eyes and saw something that frightened him more than any threat of violence. He saw certainty. She was not angry. She was not afraid. She simply knew, with absolute conviction, that her cause was right and her victory was inevitable. That was more terrifying than any weapon. On Veth Prime, the ground assault began. Human soldiers landed in precision drops, targeting military installations and government buildings. They did not attack civilian areas. They did not bomb cities. They moved like surgeons, cutting out the diseased parts while leaving the healthy tissue intact. Commander Vthrak fled his mansion as human ships appeared overhead. He ran through streets filled with panicking Vthkai, trying to reach a shelter. He was old, and his legs were weak. He had not run in years. His slaves had carried him everywhere. A human transport landed in front of him, blocking his path. Soldiers poured out, weapons raised. Vthrak looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to go. Commander Vthrak, a voice called out, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity. Specifically, the planning and execution of the new Cascadia massacre, which resulted in the deaths of 18 million civilians and the enslavement of 4 million more. A human officer stepped forward. She was tall, with gray hair and a face lined with years of grief. Vthrak did not recognize her, but she clearly recognized him. My name is Elena Vasquez, she said. 31 years ago, I stood before the Galactic Concord and asked for justice. You laughed at me. Your representative told me to accept scraps and be grateful. She stepped closer. Her eyes locked on his. Do you remember what I said? I said you would remember that day. I said you had a choice. You chose wrong, Commander. And now you will face the consequences. Vthrak tried to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be powerless, to be prey. Take him, Vasquez ordered. The soldiers secured Vthrak and loaded him onto the transport. As the ship lifted off, he looked down at his world. He saw human ships in the sky. He saw his magnificent cities under occupation. He saw everything he had built being torn down. And he understood, finally, the terrible mistake he had made 31 years ago. The interrogation of prisoners revealed the locations of the slave camps. There were hundreds of them scattered across Vthkai space, where millions of humans had been worked, bred, and discarded over 3 decades. Admiral Chen Wei dispatched rescue fleets immediately. Speed was essential. The Vthkai might try to destroy the camps to hide evidence of their crimes. The first rescue fleet reached Camp Theta 7 within hours. It was a massive mining facility carved into an asteroid. Sensors detected thousands of human life signs inside. Commander Jackson, leading the rescue team, prepared his soldiers carefully. "We don't know what condition they'll be in," he said. "Some of them have been here for 30 years. They've been through things we can't imagine. Be gentle. Be patient. Let them know they're safe." The soldiers breached the facility's outer doors and moved inside. The conditions were worse than anyone had expected. The tunnels were dark and filled with toxic dust. The air was barely breathable. Human figures moved in the shadows, thin and broken, wearing rags and chains. "United Earth Federation," Commander Jackson announced through his helmet speakers. "We're here to rescue you. You're going home." For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice emerged from the darkness. "Home?" The word was spoken in a cracked whisper, as if the speaker had forgotten how to talk. "Is this real? Are you really here?" A figure stepped forward. It was a woman, impossibly thin, her skin stretched over bones that seemed ready to break through. Her hair was gray and matted, her eyes were clouded. But somewhere in those eyes, a spark remained. "My name is Maria," she said. "Maria Santos. I was taken from New Cascadia. Is the war over? Did we win?" Commander Jackson removed his helmet so she could see his face. His eyes were wet with tears. "Yes, Maria," he said. "We won. We're taking you home." Maria Santos fell to her knees and wept. Around her, other survivors emerged from the shadows. Some could barely walk. Some could not walk at all and had to be carried. All of them were weeping, crying out names of people they had lost, asking questions about a world they had not seen in decades. The soldiers picked them up as gently as they could. Medical teams moved in to provide immediate care. Food and water were distributed. For the first time in 30 years, the survivors of New Cascadia felt human hands touching them with kindness instead of cruelty. They found fewer than 2,000 humans alive in Camp Theta 7. The records showed that over 50,000 had been sent there over the years. The rest had died in the mines. Similar scenes played out across Vthkai space. Rescue fleets liberated camp after camp, finding survivors in varying conditions. Some camps had treated their human workers slightly better than others. Some had treated them like animals. The total number of living survivors was just over 18,000. Out of the 4 million taken from New Cascadia, Farhaven, and Prosperity, only 18,000 remained alive. The recordings from the camps were sent back to human space. They showed the living conditions, the mass graves, the records of deaths. They showed children born into slavery, knowing nothing of freedom. They showed old people worked until they dropped dead. They showed cruelty beyond imagination. Humanity watched, and humanity's fire burned hotter than ever. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session. The elder races were in shock. They had never imagined humanity could do what it had just done. They had never imagined anyone could defeat the Vthkai so completely. The Presidium sent a diplomatic envoy to Admiral Chen Wei, offering to mediate peace negotiations. Surely, they said, enough blood had been spilled. Surely humanity had made its point. Surely it was time to talk. Admiral Chen Wei received the envoys on his flagship. He treated them politely, offering them food and drink. Then he showed them the recordings from the slave camps. The envoys watched in silence. Some of them, to their credit, looked horrified. Others showed no emotion at all. 30 years ago, Chen Wei said when the recordings ended, we came to the Concord asking for help. We were told that the internal practices of Concord members were not subject to Concord regulation. We were told that the Vthkai were free to manage their workforce as they saw fit. He leaned forward. You called slaves a workforce. You told us to accept money for our dead children. You laughed when we asked for justice. The Concord recognizes that mistakes were made. One envoy began. Mistakes? Chen Wei's voice was quiet but dangerous. 18 million dead. 4 million enslaved. 30 years of torture, rape, and murder in those camps. You call that mistakes? He stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Your mediation comes 30 years too late, he said. We offered you the chance to stand with us. You chose to stand aside. Now stand aside again. This is not your war. It never was. You made that clear when you refused to help us. Admiral, another envoy said carefully, the Concord has significant military assets. If you continue this campaign, we may be forced to intervene. Chenwei turned to face them. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. Then intervene, he said. We have prepared for that possibility as well. We have spent 30 years preparing for every possibility. And I promise you this, if the Concord chooses to defend the Vthkai, if the Concord chooses to protect slavers and murderers, then the Concord will learn the same lesson the Vthkai are learning right now. He gestured to the viewport, where the burning wreckage of the Vthkai defense fleet still drifted. That lesson is simple, he said. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. And humanity does not lose. The envoys left empty-handed. Their report to the Concord Presidium was stark. Humanity could not be negotiated with. They would have their justice, regardless of the cost. The Presidium debated for days. Some argued for intervention. Others counseled caution. In the end, they decided to wait and watch. Perhaps humanity would be satisfied with what they had already achieved. Perhaps they would stop. They did not stop. The systematic dismantling of the Vthkai dominion continued. Human forces moved from system to system, defeating resistance, liberating slaves, and arresting war criminals. It was not a war of extermination. Humanity did not want to destroy the Vthkai as a species. They wanted to destroy the Vthkai as a threat. Every official who had been involved in the slave trade was arrested. Every military officer who had participated in the attacks was captured. Every record of human suffering was collected and preserved for the trials to come. And on 1,000 human worlds, the survivors of the camps were welcomed home. They were given medical care, psychological support, and all the time they needed to heal. Many of them would never fully recover, but they were free. Maria Santos was among them. She returned to Earth and was reunited with cousins she had never expected to see again. When they asked about her daughter Sophia, she shook her head and wept. She died in the camps, Maria said. She was 12 years old. They worked her until she couldn't work anymore. And then she could not finish the sentence. But later that night, she looked up at the stars from her hospital window. Somewhere out there, human ships were still fighting. Human soldiers were still liberating camps. Human justice was still being delivered. We did it, Sophia, Maria whispered. We didn't forget you. We never forgot. And in the darkness of space, the work of the reckoning continued. The Galactic Concord was afraid. For 10,000 years, the elder races had ruled the spiral arm without challenge. They had fought wars among themselves, of course, but those wars followed rules. There were limits. There were negotiations. There was always a point where someone would step back and seek peace. Humanity did not step back. 3 months after the fall of Veth Prime, the human vengeance fleet had conquered 2/3 of Vthkai territory. City after city fell. Fleet after fleet was destroyed. The most powerful military in the region was being taken apart piece by piece, and the elder races could only watch in horror. They must be stopped, the Vthkai ambassador pleaded before the Presidium. His voice shook with fear. He was the only member of the Vthkai government still free. All the others had been arrested or had fled to hiding. We request military assistance from the Concord. We invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty of the Fifth Age. The Primarch, the ancient stone being who had ruled the Concord for millennia, considered the request. The Mutual Defense Treaty was clear. When a member species was attacked, other members were obligated to help. The treaty applies to unprovoked attacks, said the crystalline ambassador from the Zethai Collective. The Vthkai attacked human colonies first. They killed millions. They enslaved millions more. One could argue that humanity is simply defending itself. Defending itself? The Vthkai ambassador screamed. They are conquering our worlds. They are putting our leaders on trial. They are destroying everything we built. Everything you built was built on human bones, the Zethi ambassador replied coldly. Perhaps you should have considered this possibility before you decided to prey on them. The debate continued for weeks. Some elder races wanted to intervene. The Vthkai were trading partners. They were old allies. And more importantly, if humanity could destroy the Vthkai, they could destroy anyone. Today it is the Vthkai, warned the ambassador from the Krell Empire. Tomorrow it could be any of us. We must unite against this threat before it grows any stronger. Others were more cautious. The recordings from the slave camps had been leaked across the galaxy. Many species, even those who had no love for humans, were disturbed by what they showed. Public opinion was shifting. The Vthkai were no longer seen as victims but as criminals who were finally facing justice. In the end, 3 races agreed to send military support: the Krell Empire, the Vorthok Hegemony, and the Seleth Confederation. Together, they assembled a fleet of 12,000 ships. It was the largest combined force the Concord had fielded in 1,000 years. This will end the human threat, the Krell commander announced confidently. They may have defeated the Vthkai, but the Vthkai were weak and complacent. We are neither. The combined fleet entered human-controlled space, expecting a challenging battle. What they found was a nightmare. Admiral Chen Wei had anticipated intervention. In fact, he had planned for it. The silent years had not been spent preparing only for the Vthkai. Human strategists had studied every military power in the region. They knew how the Krell fought. They knew Vorthok tactics. They understood Seleth technology, and they had developed counters for all of it. The Battle of the Red Nebula lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 8,000 of the 12,000 Concord ships had been destroyed or captured. The rest fled in disorder, their crews traumatized by what they had experienced. Human ships had appeared from nowhere, emerging from hidden positions inside the nebula itself. They had jammed communications, divided the enemy fleet, and destroyed it in sections. They had used weapons the Concord had never seen before, and they had done it all with losses of fewer than 300 ships. How is this possible? The Krell commander demanded as his flagship burned around him. You were nothing. You were weak. How did you become this? Admiral Chen Wei responded over an open channel, his voice calm and measured. You gave us 30 years, he said. You gave us 30 years of slavery and murder to fuel our anger. You gave us 30 years of dismissal and contempt to sharpen our focus. You gave us 30 years to prepare for this exact moment. And now you ask how we became this. He paused. You made us. Remember that. You made us. The Krell commander's ship exploded moments later, struck by a precision missile that cut through his shields like paper. News of the Battle of the Red Nebula spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The elder races, accustomed to thinking of themselves as the supreme powers in existence, suddenly realized that everything had changed. Some tried to form new alliances against humanity, but the defeat at the Red Nebula had shattered confidence. No one wanted to be the next fleet destroyed. No one wanted to be the next species to face human vengeance. Others tried diplomacy. They sent envoys to Admiral Chen Wei offering peace, cooperation, even friendship. Chen Wei received them politely, listened to their offers, and declined. We do not seek war with the Concord, he explained. We seek justice from the Vthkai. If the Concord does not interfere, there will be no conflict between us. But if you choose to protect slavers, if you choose to shield those who murdered our children, then you have chosen to be our enemy, and we will treat you as such. The Concord withdrew. They issued statements condemning human aggression, but they did not send more fleets. They watched from a distance as humanity completed the dismantling of the Vthkai dominion. The conquest of Vthkai space took 2 years. In that time, humanity liberated all remaining slave camps, arrested thousands of war criminals, and established control over every Vthkai world. It was the most thorough military campaign in galactic history, but humanity did not commit genocide. This surprised many observers who had expected rivers of blood. Instead, human forces focused on precision. Military targets were destroyed. Government facilities were occupied. Weapons were seized and destroyed. But civilian populations were left largely unharmed. We are not murderers, Admiral Chen Wei explained to journalists who visited the conquered territories. We do not kill innocents to punish the guilty. The Vthkai species will survive, but the Vthkai threat will not. The trials began on the first anniversary of the reckoning. Commander Vthkai and over 3,000 other officials were brought before a human justice tribunal to answer for their crimes. The trials were broadcast across the galaxy. Every species could watch as evidence was presented. Recordings from the attacks, testimonies from survivors, documents showing the deliberate planning of the slave raids, medical reports describing the conditions in the camps. Commander Vthkai sat in the defendant's chair, watching his crimes displayed before the universe. He tried to defend himself at first, arguing that he had only followed the traditions of his people. Slavery was natural, he said. The strong took from the weak. This was how the galaxy had always worked. The chief prosecutor, a human woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, responded with cold precision. The defendant claims he followed tradition, she said. Let the record show that the Vthkai tradition includes the following practices. She activated a display showing images from the camps. Workers starving to death, bodies in mass graves, children born in chains, raised as property, worked until they broke. This is your tradition, she said. And this is what happens to species that make such traditions the basis of their civilization. The trials lasted for months. In the end, Commander Vthkai and 2,000 other officials were found guilty of crimes against humanity. The sentences varied based on the level of involvement. Some received long prison terms. Some received permanent exile to barren worlds. Vthkai himself received the harshest sentence. He was not executed. Humanity had abolished the death penalty centuries ago. Instead, he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in a rehabilitation facility, where he would be required to listen to the testimonies of survivors every day. You wanted humans to serve you, Dr. Kim told him at sentencing. Now you will spend your remaining years learning what you did to them. Perhaps by the end, you will understand. Vthkai was taken away in chains, screaming that this was wrong, that humans had no right to judge him, that the galaxy would rise up against this injustice. No one rose up. The galaxy had seen the evidence. The galaxy had watched the trials, and the galaxy had decided, collectively, that the Vthkai had gotten what they deserved. The surviving Vthkai population was relocated to reservation worlds. These were habitable planets with enough resources to support comfortable lives, but they were stripped of all weapons and space travel technology. The Vthkai would survive as a species, but they would never again threaten anyone. You are being given a chance to rebuild, Admiral Chenwei told the Vthkai leaders who would govern the reservation worlds. Use it wisely. In 5 generations, if you have proven that you can live without preying on others, humanity will consider restoring some of your freedoms. But if you ever return to your old ways, if you ever harm another innocent being, we will return. And next time, we will not be merciful. The Vthkai leaders accepted these terms. They had no choice. With the Vthkai defeated and the Concord humiliated, Admiral Chenwei prepared to address the galaxy. It was time to make humanity's position clear. The broadcast was sent to every inhabited world in the spiral arm. Every species with communication technology could see and hear Admiral Chenwei speaking from the bridge of his flagship. 31 years ago, he began. The Vthkai attacked our colony of New Cascadia. 18 million of our people were killed. 4 million were taken as slaves. We went to the Galactic Concord asking for help. We were laughed at. We were told to accept money in exchange for our children's blood. We were told we were weak, young, and worthless. He paused, letting the words sink in across 1,000 worlds. We have proven them wrong. The Vthkai Dominion no longer exists. Their military has been destroyed. Their leaders have been tried and punished. Their species has been removed as a threat to the galaxy. This is what we have done. We who were called weak and worthless. His voice hardened. Let this be a lesson to every species watching. We do not want war. We do not seek conquest. We do not desire to rule over others. But we will defend ourselves. We will protect our people. And we will never, ever allow what happened at New Cascadia to happen again. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. To any species that thinks humans are easy prey, look at what we did to the Vthkai. They were stronger than us when they attacked New Cascadia. They had more ships, more technology, more experience. Now they live on reservation worlds, stripped of everything that made them powerful. This is what happens to those who threaten humanity. To any species that thinks we can be bullied or intimidated, look at the Red Nebula. 3 elder races sent 12,000 ships against us. 8,000 were destroyed in 6 hours. This is what happens to those who stand against humanity. We are not asking for membership in your Concord. We are not seeking your approval or your friendship. We are simply telling you how things will be from now on. He raised his hand and pointed directly at the camera. The galaxy told us that strength is the only language it understands. We have become fluent. Anyone who threatens our people, our colonies, or our future will face the full power of human vengeance. This is not a warning. This is not a negotiation. This is simply a statement of fact. He lowered his hand and his expression softened slightly. But we are not monsters. We proved that when we did not exterminate the Vthkai. We proved that when we gave fair trials to those who murdered our children. We proved that when we showed mercy to populations that had shown none to us. Humanity wants peace. We want to trade, to explore, to learn, to grow. We want to be part of the galactic community. But we will only be part of it as equals. Never again as victims. Never again as prey. He stood tall, his gray hair catching the light of distant stars. Remember what we have done here. Remember that we waited 30 years for justice. Remember that we did not stop, did not surrender, did not forget. And remember this most of all, we will wait again if we have to. We will prepare again if we have to. And if any species forces us to fight again, we will win again. This is the message of humanity to the galaxy. We remember, we endure, and we do not forgive those who harm our children. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings sat in stunned silence, absorbing what they had heard. The old order was dead. A new era had begun, and at the center of it stood humanity. No longer weak, no longer young, no longer willing to be anyone's prey. On Earth, people gathered in streets and parks to watch the broadcast together. When Admiral Chen Wei finished speaking, they cheered. They wept. They embraced each other. For the first time in 31 years, they felt safe. For the first time in 31 years, the fire that burned in their hearts was matched by power in their hands. And for the first time in 31 years, the names of the 18 million dead could rest in peace, knowing that their children and grandchildren would never suffer as they had suffered. The reckoning was complete. But the story of humanity was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the end of the reckoning. The galaxy was a different place now. The old certainties were gone. The old powers were diminished. And at the center of everything was a species that had once been considered worthless. Humanity had not become an empire. This surprised many observers who had expected them to use their victory as a foundation for conquest. Other species had done this throughout galactic history. You defeated one enemy, then you used your momentum to defeat another, and another, until you controlled as much territory as you could hold. Humans did not follow this path. Instead, they created something called the Human Protectorate. It was not an empire but a defensive alliance. Human worlds protected each other. Human fleets patrolled their borders. Human soldiers stood ready to respond to any threat, but they did not expand. They did not conquer new territories. They did not impose their will on other species. We fight only when we must, Admiral Chen Wei explained to the many journalists who asked about humanity's intentions. We built our strength to protect ourselves, not to dominate others. The galaxy has enough empires. We do not need another one. The elder races of the Concord watched humanity with a mixture of fear and confusion. They did not understand a species that had so much power but chose not to use it for expansion. In their experience, power always led to conquest. That was simply how things worked. Slowly, tentatively, some of them began to approach humanity with offers of friendship. The Zethi collective was the first. They were crystalline beings who valued knowledge and art above military strength. They had spoken against intervention during the reckoning, and their ambassador had defended humanity's right to seek justice. We wish to establish formal diplomatic relations, the Zethi ambassador said when she met with the new human president, a woman named Victoria Okonkwo. We believe our species can learn much from each other. President Okonkwo accepted the offer. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges were arranged. Zethi scholars came to human universities, and human scientists visited Zethi research facilities. Other species followed the Zethi example. Some did so out of genuine interest in humanity. Others did so out of fear, believing that friendship with humans was safer than hostility. Whatever their reasons, The isolation of the silent years was ending, but humanity did not forget what had happened during the reckoning. They did not forget which species had stood aside when they were attacked, and which species had sent fleets to defend the Vthkai. The Krell Empire, the Vthkai hegemony, and the Seleth Confederation were not welcomed back into human good graces. Their ambassadors were received politely but coldly. Trade with them was limited. Military cooperation was refused entirely. You chose your side at the Red Nebula, President Okonkwo told the Krell ambassador. You sent ships to protect slavers. You tried to stop us from liberating our people from the camps. We will not forget this. But the war is over, the ambassador protested. Surely we can move forward. We can move forward when we are ready. Okonkwo replied. That time has not yet come. Perhaps in a generation. Perhaps in a century. Humanity has a long memory, ambassador. You should know that by now. The ambassador left empty-handed, just like all the others from his species. The Galactic Concord still existed, but it was weaker than before. Humanity's refusal to join sent a clear message. The old institution was not worthy of respect. Slowly, other species began to form their own alliances outside the Concord framework. The Zethi and the humans established bilateral agreements. The Seleth, embarrassed by their participation in the failed intervention, quietly withdrew from Concord politics. The Primarch, the ancient stone being who had ruled the Concord for 3,000 years, addressed the Presidium on the anniversary of the Red Nebula. We made a mistake, he admitted, his voice heavy with centuries of pride being swallowed. When humanity came to us seeking justice, we turned them away. We told them they were unimportant. We told them their dead children were not our concern. We were wrong. He looked around the chamber at representatives from species who had once considered themselves masters of the galaxy. We created the enemy that defeated us. Every time we dismissed human grief, we added fuel to their fire. Every year we allowed the Vthkai to raid human colonies. We strengthened human resolve. We thought we were teaching them weakness. Instead, we were teaching them strength. Let this be a lesson for the Concord, he concluded. The weak do not stay weak forever. The young do not stay young forever. And those we abuse today may become our judges tomorrow. We would do well to remember this in the future. It was the closest the Concord ever came to apologizing for what they had done. On New Cascadia, the restoration was complete. The planet that had been turned into a graveyard was alive again. New cities rose where old ones had fallen. New forests grew where old ones had burned. New generations played in parks and attended schools where their grandparents had died. The Memorial Plaza at Haven City was the heart of the restored colony. 18 million stone markers stood in perfect rows, each one bearing the name of someone who had been lost. Visitors came from all over human space to walk among the markers, to trace the names with their fingers, to remember. Maria Santos came here every year on the anniversary. She was 92 now, frail but still strong enough to make the journey. She walked slowly through the rows until she found the marker she was looking for. Sofia Santos, age 7, taken from New Cascadia, died in captivity, never forgotten. Maria knelt in front of the marker, her old bones protesting. She placed a small bundle of flowers at its base. I came home, Sophia, she whispered. I survived, and I came home. I wish you could have come with me. I wish I could have protected you. But I couldn't. All I could do was remember. She touched the stone gently. They came for us, baby girl. They came with ships and soldiers and all the power we dreamed about in those terrible years. They broke the Vthkai. They punished the ones who hurt us. They set us free. Tears ran down her wrinkled face. You didn't die for nothing. None of you died for nothing. Your suffering made us strong. Your memory gave us purpose. And now, because of what happened here, no human child will ever suffer the way you suffered. She struggled to her feet, refusing help from the caretaker who stood nearby. I'll see you again soon, my love. Not today, but soon. Wait for me. She walked away slowly, her figure small against the endless rows of markers. Behind her, the sun set over the restored city, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now 93 years old, gave an interview on the 40th anniversary of the massacre. She sat in a comfortable chair in her home on Earth, surrounded by photographs of her long career. Reporters from every major human news network had gathered to hear her thoughts. Do you have any regrets about the path humanity chose? One reporter asked. Elena was quiet for a long moment, remembering the chamber of the Presidium, the laughter of the elder races, the contempt in Kethvor's eyes when he told her to accept scraps. The galaxy offered us peace without justice, she finally said. They offered us money instead of accountability. They wanted us to move on, to forget our dead, to accept our place at the bottom of their hierarchy. They didn't understand what they were asking. She shifted in her chair, her old body uncomfortable but her mind sharp as ever. We are human. We love deeply, grieve deeply, and when our children are taken from us, we do not rest until the scales are balanced. The elder races called us primitive for this. Perhaps we are, but our children sleep safe now. Our colonies grow without fear. Our dead are avenged. Was there another path? She continued. Perhaps, but they didn't offer us one. They offered us silence and submission. We chose to speak, and we spoke in the only language the galaxy understood. What about the future? Another reporter asked. What do you hope for humanity going forward? Elena smiled, the expression both warm and sad. I hope we never have to fight like that again. I hope the galaxy has learned its lesson. I hope other species will treat each other with more respect than they treated us. She paused. But if we do have to fight again, I know we will. That fire we discovered in ourselves, that determination, that refusal to surrender, it's part of us now. It's in our blood, our culture, our very identity. We will never go back to being the innocent, trusting species we were before New Cascadia. That innocence was burned away with our children. But in its place, we have something stronger. We have unity. We have purpose. We have the knowledge that we can face any challenge and survive. Admiral Chenwei died peacefully in his sleep 3 years after the interview, at the age of 94. He was buried with full military honors, his coffin draped in the flag of the United Earth Federation. Millions attended the funeral, and billions more watched from their homes across the 17 worlds. President Concord gave the eulogy. James Chen was a survivor of New Cascadia, she said. He lost his brother, his sister-in-law, and his 3 nieces and nephews in the attack. He walked through the ashes of their home and made a promise that he spent the rest of his life keeping. He built the fleet that freed our people. He commanded the forces that broke the Vthkai. He led us from weakness to strength, from despair to victory, from being prey to being a power that the galaxy respects. But he was more than a warrior. He was a symbol of what humanity can achieve when we work together, when we refuse to give up, when we channel our grief into action instead of despair. She looked out at the crowd, her voice strong. Admiral Chen is gone, but what he built remains. Our fleet remains. Our strength remains. Our unity remains. And our memory remains. As long as humans exist, we will remember the 18 million. We will remember the silent years. We will remember the reckoning. And we will remember the man who led us through the fire and into the light. The funeral ended with a moment of silence. Across all human space, every ship, every factory, every school went quiet for 60 seconds. 25 billion humans stood still, united in grief and gratitude. Then the moment passed, and life continued. 10 years after the reckoning, humanity had fully integrated into the galactic community as an equal partner, not a subject. Human scientists collaborated with Vthkai researchers on projects that advanced technology for everyone. Human artists created works that were celebrated across 100 worlds. Human merchants traded goods that were valued everywhere. But the military remained ready. The Vengeance Fleet was renamed the Protector Fleet, but its ships were just as powerful, its crews just as trained, its resolve just as strong. Every human knew that peace was maintained through strength, and they were determined to never be weak again. The annual anniversary of New Cascadia became a galactic event. Species from across the spiral arm sent representatives to attend the memorial ceremony. Some came out of respect, some came out of curiosity. Some came to remind themselves of what could happen if they pushed another species too far. At the ceremony on the 50th anniversary, a new monument was unveiled next to the memorial plaza. It was a massive sculpture of a human woman holding a child. Her face turned toward the sky. Beneath it was an inscription. We remember the past. We protect the future. Never again. Thousands of humans gathered around the monument, along with representatives from dozens of alien species. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. The current president, a man named James Santos, Maria's great-nephew, gave the keynote speech. 50 years ago, our world burned, he said. 50 years ago, we stood alone against a galaxy that did not care if we lived or died. 50 years ago, we made a choice. He gestured to the monument behind him. That choice was not easy. We could have accepted what was offered to us. We could have mourned our dead and moved on. We could have remained the quiet, unremarkable species the galaxy expected us to be. His voice grew stronger. Instead, we chose to remember. We chose to prepare. We chose to fight. And we chose to win. Some have asked if the price was too high. The silent years were hard. The reckoning was bloody. The transformation we underwent changed us in ways we are still discovering. But I ask you this: what is the price of freedom? What is the price of safety? What is the price of knowing that your children will never be taken in chains, will never burn while the galaxy looks away, will never cry out for help that does not come? He pointed to the rows of memorial markers. The 18 million paid that price. The 4 million who suffered in the camps paid that price. Every human who worked and sacrificed during the silent years paid that price. And because they paid it, we are free. He turned to face the alien representatives. To our friends in the galaxy, we say thank you for standing with us now, even if you did not stand with us then. We welcome your friendship. We welcome your cooperation. We welcome a future where all species are treated with respect and dignity. But to anyone who might be thinking about repeating the mistakes of the past, we say this: remember New Cascadia. Remember the silent years. Remember the reckoning. And remember what happens to those who prey on the innocent. He raised his hand toward the sky, where the stars were just becoming visible in the evening light. We are human. We remember. We endure. And we will never, ever forget. The crowd cheered. The alien representatives watched with expressions ranging from respect to fear to something like understanding. High above, the ships of the Protector fleet passed in silent formation, their running lights tracing patterns across the darkening sky. On one of those ships, a young officer stood at the viewport, looking down at the memorial ceremony below. Her name was Sophia Chen, named after Admiral Chen Wei's niece, who had died at New Cascadia. She was the 4th generation to serve in the fleet, carrying on a tradition that began with grief and transformed into purpose. She touched the window gently, watching the lights of the memorial plaza flicker like stars on the ground. We remember, she whispered, as her great-grandfather had once whispered in a ruined city, standing in the ashes of his family's home. We remember, and we endure. The ship moved on, joining the eternal patrol that kept humanity safe. Below, on New Cascadia, the ceremony ended and people began to make their way home. Some stopped at the memorial markers to say goodbye to loved ones. Some simply stood and looked at the stars, thinking about the vastness of the galaxy and humanity's place in it. The fire that had been lit 50 years ago still burned in their hearts. But it was no longer a fire of grief and rage. It was a fire of determination, of unity, of unshakable resolve. They had been tested by the worst the galaxy could offer, and they had not just survived, they had triumphed. And as long as that fire burned, as long as humans remembered the lessons of New Cascadia, no one would ever threaten their children again. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity would make sure they never forgot it. On the memorial plaza, the monument stood in the darkness, illuminated by soft lights that would never go out. The woman in the sculpture looked eternally toward the sky, holding her child close, her face a mixture of grief and hope and fierce, protective love. At her feet, the words gleamed in the night. We remember the past. We protect the future. Never again. And across the galaxy, wherever humans lived and worked and dreamed, those words echoed in every heart. Never again. Never again. Never again.